They came for him after he began transmitting incredible messages from the world of the deceased. They pursued him. Someone didn't want the truth to be made public. Random events started happening too frequently. Someone tried to silence him. But why? What exactly had he learned that endangered his life? Today, I will report on the mysterious circumstances surrounding Shiku Xavier, a man who claimed to hear voices from the afterlife. He created hundreds of books, which he wrote under the dictation of spirits, but some of them were so shocking that soon strange things began to happen around him. What secrets did he uncover? Why did his words scare influential people? And who began to pursue him after he learned the truth? Stay until the end, because this story could change your perception of life after death. Shiku Xavier came into the world in a poor Brazilian family, and from childhood, he had to face difficult trials. He lost his mother early, and this tragedy left a deep mark on his soul. For a child raised in poverty, this was a real blow. The family had to struggle to survive. Often, there wasn't enough to eat, and expensive toys and entertainment were only a dream. However, the hardships did not break him. On the contrary, they strengthened him. Unlike many of his peers, he did not have the opportunity to study at prestigious educational institutions and did not receive a classical education. His world consisted of the streets of his hometown, the books he had obtained, and his thoughts about the meaning of life. From an early age, he felt that reality was not limited to just the material world, that there was more to life than simple, everyday existence. But the most astonishing thing about his life was that, despite all the difficulties, Shiku wrote more than 100 books. How could a person without a proper education create so many works? The answer was unexpected. He claimed that he was not the true author of these books. Shiku said that he had not invented the books himself, but had only served as a channel through which messages from the afterlife were transmitted. The spirits used him to convey their stories, experiences, and revelations to the living. Skeptics questioned him, critics called him a fraud. But one thing was undeniable. His books touched something deep within the soul of every reader. They gave hope, explained the unexplained, and spoke of the afterlife as if the author himself had been there. Shiku Xavier never sought to make money from his books. He believed that the words he transmitted did not belong to him, and therefore, he donated all proceeds from their sale to charity. Money held no special value for him. He considered it an instrument of the material world, completely unnecessary for the soul. He was not concerned with wealth, but with spiritual growth. He wanted to help as many people as possible. Among many of his books, one became particularly famous, the story of André Luiz, a doctor who died from a disease and landed in a world full of darkness. Through Shiku, he transmitted his story, and it became a true revelation for millions of people. Because André Luiz, like many others, believed that after death, he would either face nothingness or a bright afterlife. But the reality was entirely different. This book changed the perception of thousands of people about life after death. Some saw it as the confirmation of their fears, others as hope that one could still find a way to the light even after death. But the most important thing was that it made people reflect on their actions in life, as these determine what awaits us after death. During his lifetime, André Luiz was a respected man whom many looked up to. He had an excellent education, graduated from medical school, and achieved success in his profession. He was considered one of the best specialists, and the patients trusted him. He cared for his family, provided for his wife and children, and strived to give them the best. As most people dream, he had stability, success, respect, and material wealth. What else does one need for happiness? He was no criminal, he didn't wrong people, and he committed no crimes. If anyone had told him that after death, he would not find peace, but rather a nightmare, he would have simply smiled. Because, as he thought, when death comes, everything ends. But he was wrong. When his earthly journey ended, he felt neither lightness nor the transition to the bright world spoken of in religious texts. Instead, he awakened in a place that was foreign, cold, and terrifying. All around him, there was not a single familiar face, not a beam of light, no peace. Instead of heavenly melodies, he heard the dull, ominous silence, sometimes interrupted by distant moans. At first, he didn't understand what had happened. Perhaps he had simply lost consciousness. Could it have been the effect of the anesthesia after the operation? He tried to recall the last moments of his life, but the memory seemed to dissipate, leaving only fragmented pieces. Perhaps he was still alive? Was he lying in a hospital room? But why was it so dark and oppressive around him? Why did the fear, which slowly seized his consciousness, grow stronger with every passing second? He tried to move, but his arms and legs were as heavy as lead, as if his body had been frozen in lead. He heard his breath. It was labored and hoarse. Where is he? What kind of place was this? He looked around, but there was nothing to see except darkness. It surrounded him, not only encompassing him, but also everywhere. Oppressive, endless, like a living being that watched over him from the depths. Panic began to grow. He tried to move, but every step felt incredibly difficult, as if his strength was leaving him with each moment. As if the very space itself resisted his attempts to escape. He wanted to scream, to call out for someone, but his voice could not be heard. Instead, only a faint cough escaped his lips. Everything within him protested. This shouldn't be happening. He didn't deserve this. He had done nothing to be thrown into this nightmare. But reality did not listen to his excuses. It simply was. It enveloped him and sank him into an abyss of fear from which there was no way to escape. And then real, primordial panic took hold of him. Suddenly, he realized that no one would come for him. No one would pull him out of here. He was alone, completely alone, in this empty, gloomy, merciless world, which had now become his new reality. This place resembled a nightmare, but it was worse than any he had ever experienced in life. There were no walls, no boundaries, but the air seemed to suffocate him from all sides, filling his lungs with an oppressive, heavy weight. All around him stretched an endless, thick fog. It didn't dissolve, but seemed to move, alive, cold, hostile. It began to take on frightening shapes. Sometimes, André noticed silhouettes in the darkness, distorted, thin like burned figures. They appeared and disappeared, as if they were watching him. But they did not rush toward him. The most terrifying thing was not the figures themselves, but their voices. They sounded from a distance, echoing somewhere directly behind him. They kept saying the same thing. You are a criminal. You do not deserve the light. You have broken the law of life. There was no anger in these voices. There was something inevitable, undeniable in them. It was like a judgment that had been passed upon him with no possibility of appeal. André couldn't understand why he was being punished so. He had done nothing wrong. He had never killed, never harmed anyone. He lived by moral standards. He was a doctor, saving lives. Why was he being accused now? He remembered the last days of his life, the illness, the hospital bed, the tired eyes of the doctors who fought for him until his last breath. He, too, had fought for his life. It was absurd. Among the suicides, he was certainly not one of them. He had not made that decision. His body had simply given out. The panic increased, but not just because of the confusion and fear. Suddenly, he began to feel something else, something he never thought he would experience after death. Hunger. Not just the faint feeling of emptiness in his stomach, but something agonizing, all-consuming. He felt his body contracting from the lack of food, as if every cell in his body was beginning to perish. Thirst was even worse. His mouth was dry. His throat felt as if it were made of sand. Every breath was a struggle. He tried to find something to ease this suffering. Sometimes he stumbled upon dark, damp leaves, took them in his hands, and chewed eagerly. But the taste was disgusting, bitter, with a metallic aftertaste. Every now and then, he found murky puddles of water and drank from them. But the relief never came. The thirst didn't go away. It only grew stronger. It was as if the water he drank didn't satisfy him. But hunger and thirst were not the worst. The worst was the realization that he was not alone. He could feel them. These beings, they were hiding in the shadows. But their presence was palpable, almost tangible. He knew they were watching him. Their gazes were heavy, penetrating, as if they were reading his thoughts and bringing his own fears into sharp focus. Sometimes, when he fell asleep from exhaustion, they would come closer. He couldn't see them, but he felt their heavy breath near him, vague movements, as if someone was reaching out a hand toward him, but pulling it back at the last moment. It was not just a place. It was a judgment. And the worst part was that he didn't know if there was a way out of here. But one day, everything changed. When André Luiz woke up, he felt that something had happened. The first thing he felt was warmth. It was gentle, enveloping, completely different from the eerie cold that had been chasing him in the darkness. His eyes, which had grown accustomed to the endless shadows and fog, began to recognize light, bright but not blinding. It filled everything around him, creating a feeling of calm and security. For the first time in all this time, André felt that he was no longer alone. Slowly, he rose, feeling weak. Around him was a space, spacious, bright, filled with a glow that seemed to come not just from the windows but from the walls themselves. He had never seen anything like it. This light not only warmed his body, but also comforted his soul. There was no cruelty in it, only gentleness and peace. He had never before viewed the sunlight with such joy, delight, and awe. Before him stood a man, tall, with a peaceful face, eyes full of wisdom and compassion. His long hair gleamed faintly in the light, and his clothing resembled light, loose garments that André had once seen in depictions of ancient philosophers. He had something captivating about him, something that inspired trust. "You are safe," the elderly man spoke calmly. His voice sounded like the rustling of leaves, like the sound of a sea wave touching the shore. "My name is Claren." André stared at him, trying to understand what was happening. Was this possible? Just moments ago, he had been wandering in a nightmare world, surrounded by beings that had lost their human form. And suddenly, this light, this space, this man looking at him with kindness. "Where am I?" he finally managed to ask. "You are in the spiritual world that borders the earth," Claren answered without turning his gaze away. "The light you see comes from the sun. It nurtures your life on earth, but also carries something greater within, the energy of the Creator. It not only gives warmth, it connects all living things, linking us to the world beyond human understanding." André tried to grasp what was being said. He looked at his hands. They looked exactly as they had in life, but they were lighter, as if freed from the former weight. He still felt like himself, but at the same time, something new was within him. Something had changed. Claren continued to speak, and with every word, André began to understand. "The problem is not that you died, André." His voice was gentle but firm. "The problem is how you lived." These words hit him harder than any fear in the world of darkness. Claren did not condemn. He did not accuse. He simply spoke the truth. André stood still, trying to process the words spoken by Claren. There was no room for excuses in Claren's words. He was shaken. It seemed as though his entire life, his experiences, fears, mistakes, was coming together in an image he had not been able to see before. "You destroyed your health," the old man continued. "Anger, resentment, excess, indifference to your own body. All of this is the result of your lifestyle. You led yourself here." These words struck him like a revelation. He had always blamed fate, the doctors, the circumstances, anyone but himself. But now, with this new understanding, an entire truth unfolded before him. He had lived in a battle with inner contradictions, with emotions he couldn't control. All those moments when he neglected his body, when he got angry over trivial things and allowed sadness to consume him, had led him to this world. He felt the heavy weight of this awareness tighten around his soul. How could he have been so blind, so irresponsible? Claren stepped closer, his gaze gentle but full of understanding. He did not condemn André, did not blame him. He simply helped him see the truth. "Many souls find darkness after death," the old man continued. "They're trapped by their worldly attachments, their pain, their mistakes. They cannot find the way to the light, because they have closed that path to themselves." In André's mind, images from his last journey in the darkness flashed by. The distorted figures, the eerie groans. Were they all like him? people who didn't understand that they were carrying their own burden. But everything changed when Claren added, "But when a soul has people who love them, who do not forget and care for them." His voice was full of warmth. "That is why you are here. Those who love you have prayed for you. They did not allow you to remain in the darkness." André froze. Who could have prayed for him? Who, besides himself, could have cared for his soul? He thought of his family, of his parents, who had passed away when he was still young. He thought of friends, of people he had lost. Was their love so powerful that it could rescue him from the abyss? Then André understood. Love does not disappear with physical death. It remains. It can be a powerful force that saves, helps, and cleanses. He closed his eyes and felt this awareness fill him, bringing him peace. It was the deepest feeling, not of emptiness, but of a path. The path he still needed to walk to cleanse his soul and find his way to the light. After his encounter with Claren, André's life changed. He could no longer simply sit and wait for salvation. He understood that, after walking this path himself, he had to help others. He could not forget those still wandering in the darkness, trapped in their deceptions, unable to see the light. One day, when he met the soul of a woman who had died in 1888, André understood the importance of not judging or accusing, but simply helping others see the truth. This woman had been a landowner, and despite her death, she could not let go of her beliefs in slavery and social hierarchy. She could not understand why she was in the emptiness, unable to grasp that her earthly beliefs had led her to this world of alienation. André did not condemn her. Instead, he helped her see the truth, that her ideals were illusions and her view of the world limited. He saw how, with every word, she began to change. It was not an immediate realization, but eventually, a faint glimmer of light appeared in her soul. She took the first step toward remorse and redemption. This case became an important lesson for André. He understood that souls continued to learn even after death. He realized that helping others was not only the way to atone for his own mistakes, but also a chance to move closer to the light. And now that he knew his purpose, he was ready to act. He would help those who were lost in their own deceptions, those who still needed to find their way to the light. And this path, as he now understood, was not only his personal salvation, but also a service to others.